The call came in at 11:47 on a Tuesday night, which meant Cara Reyes had exactly 13 minutes left on her shift and exactly zero intention of staying late. She was pulling her locker key out of her pocket when the radio crackled. Multi-vehicle, 2 down, 1 critical, ETA, 4 minutes. She put the key back. That was the thing about being a nurse in the emergency department at St. Anthony's Medical Center in Chicago. You didn't get to have 13 minutes. You had the next 4, and then whatever came after that. The ambulance bay doors blew open, and the gurney came through, fast wheels shrieking on the tile. Cara was already gloved. The paramedic, a big guy named Darnell, who she'd worked with for 2 years, was doing compressions with one hand and rattling off vitals with the other. Male mid-30s motorcycle versus semi on the 94. No helmet. Ejected approximately 40 feet. BP's tanked sat at 82 GCS7. 2 large-bore IVs, 1 liter in. Cara walked alongside the gurney without breaking stride, eyes moving fast. Road rash across his left side, bad enough that she could see the glint of something under the skin at the shoulder. Left leg was wrong. The angle of it, wrong. The kind of wrong that meant the orthopedic team was going to have a long night. His face was a mess of gravel and dried blood, but under all of it, she could see the bone structure was solid. Jaw clenched, even through unconsciousness, like he was still fighting something. "Trauma 1, she said, and the team moved. The next 40 minutes were the kind that she couldn't explain to people who weren't in the room. Not chaos, exactly. More like controlled ferocity. Everybody knowing their lane, nobody stepping out of it. The patient at the center of a machine that only worked when all the parts moved together. She hung the blood. She called the labs. She was the one who noticed his O2 sat drop to 78, while Dr. Patterson was focused on the leg and said quietly, but without any question in her voice, "We need a chest film right now." And she was right. Tension pneumothorax, left side. The needle decompression bought them 3 minutes, and the chest tube bought him a lot more. By 1 in the morning, he was in surgery. By 2, he was in the ICU, intubated, both legs in external fixators, a chest drain running, and his blood pressure finally sitting in a place that didn't make her jaw tight. She wrote her notes at the nursing station, the floor quiet now. The overhead lights in the ICU had a particular quality at 2 in the morning. The kind of flat, pale light that made everything look a little too real. She could see him through the glass partition, the rise and fall of his chest, mechanical and steady, because the ventilator was doing that work for him. Someone had cleaned most of the road rash. The bruising was coming up dark along his left side. No identification, no next of kin contact, no insurance card. The ER registration on desk had pulled nothing off the motorcycle plates because the motorcycle was currently in pieces across 3 lanes of the 94. She went home at 2:30. She had to be back at 7. She didn't think about him specifically when she came in for her next shift. You couldn't do that, carry every patient from one shift into the next. You'd fall apart by your 3rd week on the floor. But when he checked the board at the start of her rounds and saw that the John Doe from Trauma 1 the night before had been moved out of the ICU and into room 412, she made a note to look in. She found him awake. Not fully awake. His eyes were open, but they weren't tracking yet the kind of glassy half-consciousness that happened after 3 hours of anesthesia and a night on the ventilator. The tube was out, which was good. His breathing was labored, but self-sustaining. She checked his drain, checked his vitals on the monitor, and adjusted the flow on his IV, and was writing in the chart when he said something. It came out rough, a voice that sounded like it had been put through gravel and then dried out, which was essentially what had happened to the rest of him. She almost missed it. "Hey," she looked up. He was watching her. Eyes dark brown, she noticed, almost black, and even swimming in whatever the overnight team had given him for pain. There was something in them that was alert, something that was paying attention. "Hey, yourself," she said. "You're at St. Anthony's. You were in an accident last night. You're okay. Do you know your name?" A pause. His jaw worked. "Cole." "Last name?" Another pause longer. She wondered if it was the drugs or something else. "Mercer," he said. "Cole Mercer. Good. Do you remember what happened?" "Truck." He closed his eyes, opened them again. "Didn't see me." "No, it didn't." She made another note. "You've got a chest tube on the left side. Try not to reach for it. You've got 2 fractures in your left leg and 1 in your right, and your shoulder's going to need another surgery when you're stable enough. You're looking at a few weeks minimum, maybe longer." "Okay." He absorbed that. She watched him take inventory of himself with his eyes looking down the length of his body, the way people did when they were trying to make what they felt match what they were being told. "Who are you?" he asked. "Cara Reyes. I'm your nurse." She capped her pen. "You got lucky. You know that, right?" The corner of his mouth moved. It wasn't quite a smile. It was more like he found the idea of luck complicated. "Jury's out on that one," he said. She almost said something to that. Instead, she finished her charting, told him she'd be back in an hour, and moved to the next room. She had 11 other patients. Cole Mercer's philosophy on luck was not her problem, except things got complicated pretty fast, and in a way that had no thing to do with nursing, and everything to do with the billing department. The hospital's financial coordinator, a woman named Janet Huing, who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and had the particular energy of someone who had been saying no to people for 20 years, stopped Cara in the hallway on the 3rd day. "Your patient in 412? Janet said. "No insurance on file, no ID verified yet. He gave us a name and a date of birth, but we can't confirm. We're going to need someone to come down and work out a payment plan, or we start the discharge process." Cara stopped walking. "He's 3 days post-op from a hemothorax and 2 leg fractures. He can't be discharged." "Medically stable is the standard. He's not medically stable. He's medically surviving, which is a different thing." She kept her voice even. "Give me a few days. I'll figure something out." Janet gave her the look that said this was not Janet's problem to figure out. "We've got policies, Cara." "I know the policies. A few days." She didn't actually have a plan. What she had was the memory of his face when he'd woken up, that particular combination of pain and something underneath pain that she'd seen before in patients who were alone. The ones where she'd ask, "What do you want us to call?" And the answer was, nobody. She'd asked Cole that question on day 2 when he was more coherent. He'd looked at the ceiling for a long moment before he said, "There's no one." Just like that. Not sad about it. Not performing toughness about it. Just stating it the way you'd state the weather. She went back to 412 that afternoon, between rounds. He was sitting up, which was new. Still couldn't do much with the left side. The chest tube still in the leg, in a fixator that kept him pinned to the bed frame at a specific angle. But he'd managed to get himself vertical against the pillows, and he had the TV on with the sound down. He turned it off when she came in, which she noticed. "They're trying to discharge you," she said. No preamble. He seemed like someone who'd appreciate that. He didn't look surprised. I figured. "You don't have insurance?" "No." "Is there a reason you don't want to tell us more about yourself? Because if you've got a policy somewhere we're not finding it, that would help." He looked at her for a moment. Outside the window, Chicago in November was doing its thing. Flat gray sky, the kind that pressed down on the city like a lid. The light in the room was thin and cold. "There's no policy," he said. "You know they can work out a payment plan. It won't be small. The surgery alone." "I know what it'll be." His voice wasn't defensive. It was tired in a way that wasn't about the accident. The kind of tired that lived in people before they got hurt. "I'll figure it out." She pulled up the chair by his bed and sat down, which was something she almost never did. She didn't have time to sit. 11 patients and a floor that never slowed down. "What do you do?" she asked. He looked at the ceiling. "Right now, nothing. Before last week, I built things." "What kind of things?" Custom stuff. Motorcycles mostly. Some furniture. Whatever someone needed. She thought about that. You have a shop. Had. A pause. It was a rental. Month to month. She looked at the fixator on his leg. 2 surgeries, and a 3rd scheduled. The shop, she understood without him saying it, was probably gone. The ability to do the work that kept it running was months from being back, if it came back at all. She got up. I'm going to talk to the social worker on our floor. There are programs. It's not a fast process, but it's something. You don't have to do that. I know I don't. She moved to the door. How's your pain level right now on a scale of 1 to 10? He thought about it, and she got the sense he was actually thinking about it rather than just saying 5 the way most patients did. 6, he said. I'll have someone bring you something. She was in the doorway when he said, Reyes. She turned. Thank you, he said. The words were plain, no performance in them. For last night. I know it was you. She looked at him for a second. How do you know that? Darnell told me. He came by this morning. Another pause. He said you called the chest thing, the pneumo. She nodded once. That's the job. Yeah, said Cole Mercer, looking at her with those dark eyes that were too alert for someone on the amount of pain medication he was on. Sure. The social worker's name was Bev, and Bev was good at her job, which meant she was honest about timelines. Illinois' Indigent Care Program had a backlog. The hospital's charity care fund was reviewed quarterly, and the next review was 6 weeks out. In the meantime, the billing department was going to do what billing departments did. What the billing department did, as it turned out, was send a notice on day 6 saying Cole Mercer's bill had exceeded a threshold that triggered a mandatory payment discussion, and that absent insurance verification or a signed payment plan, discharge planning would begin regardless of the attending physician's recommendation. Cara got to the floor at 6:53 that morning, 7 minutes before the start of her shift, which was early even for her. She saw the notice on the chart before she saw anything else. She stood at the nursing station for a moment, looking at it. Then she made a decision that she didn't fully examine because, if she'd examined it, she might have talked herself out of it. She went to room 412. Cole was awake. He was always awake early, she'd noticed. The nights were hard for him. The kind of hard that happened to people who'd grown up sleeping lightly, and the hospital wasn't a place that let you sleep anyway. I'm going to cover the copay, she said. He looked at her, very still. No, you're not. I'm going to cover the immediate balance that's triggering the discharge notice. It's enough to keep you in here until the charity care application goes through. She didn't say the number. The number would have made the conversation about the number. Reyes. His voice had an edge in it. You're a nurse. I'm not going to let you. I'm not asking, she said. I'm telling you what's going to happen, so you're not surprised when the billing notice updates. He was quiet. She could see him working through it, the way his jaw set and his eyes went flat, and she recognized that, too. The specific pride of someone who had never let anyone do something for them, possibly ever. It was a kind of armor that worked right up until the moment it didn't. Why? He said. She thought about how to answer that. Because you have 3 surgeries to go, and I've watched the floor social worker do everything she can do, and it's not enough, and you don't have anyone to call. That's why. She paused. And because when I was 22, my mom was in a hospital for 6 weeks, and someone covered a gap that we couldn't cover, and we never found out who did it. So. He looked at her for a long time. The monitors beeped. Down the hall, someone was getting a blood pressure cuff. I'll pay you back, he said. Okay. I mean it. I know you do. She picked up his chart. Now can I check your drain, or are we still doing this conversation? The corner of his mouth moved again. This time it made it further. Almost a real thing. Do your job, he said. The thing was, she hadn't actually decided to cover it until she was standing in that room saying it. The money was her emergency fund. $1,800 she kept in a savings account that she'd been building for 2 years against the possibility of her car dying or her apartment heating going out or any of the other things that happened to people who made $33 an hour in Chicago and sent $200 a month to her mom in Pilsen and had exactly no financial safety net. She didn't transfer it that morning. She transferred it that evening after her shift, sitting in her car in the hospital parking garage, because it was cold enough outside that the temperature had dropped below 10, and the garage felt, if not warm, at least not actively hostile. She looked at the account for a moment before she hit confirm. Then she hit confirm. She drove home. She ate cereal because she was too tired to cook. She went to bed. She didn't tell anyone what she'd done. Not her coworker Priya, who she had coffee with between rounds, and who would have said, "Cara, oh my God," but gently. Not her mom. Nobody. It wasn't that big a deal. That was what she told herself. People did things like this all the time. She was good at believing things that weren't quite true when the alternative was spending energy she didn't have on the truth. Cole Mercer's third surgery was on a Friday, and this time she wasn't on the floor when he went in. She was in the pediatric overflow unit, covering for someone out sick, a rotation she hated, because the pediatric wing was a different kind of hard. The particular hard of children who didn't understand what was being done to their bodies, and parents who understood too well. She checked his chart from the nursing station on her lunch break. Surgery went well. He was in recovery, expected to be back in 4:12 by late afternoon. She told herself she was checking the chart because he was still technically her patient. On day 8, she came in to find him sitting in the chair by the window instead of in bed, which meant the physical therapy team had been in and had done their thing. The leg fixator was off the external frame now, internal fixation in place, which meant he could manage a transfer with assistance. He looked terrible. He also looked, she thought, considerably more like himself, whatever that meant, because she barely knew him. She did know, after 8 days, some things. She knew he took his coffee black when the cafeteria volunteer brought rounds. She knew he slept between 3 and 5 in the afternoon and was awake again by 6, and that after that he was restless in a specific way, like a person who was used to working with their hands and had nothing to do with them. She knew that when Dr. Patterson came in for rounds. Cole asked actual questions, technical questions about the fixation hardware, the tension on the plate, the expected load-bearing timeline, and listened to the answers the way a person listened when they were filing information for later. She knew he'd started asking the day nurses to bring him books from the patient library down the hall. Not novels. Technical manuals, engineering texts, one on materials, science that she'd seen him reading at 11 at night when she'd done a late check-in. "You teaching yourself something?" she'd asked that time. He'd looked up. "Redesigning a frame component. In my head. Trying to work out the stress distribution on a custom rear suspension I was building when this happened." "In your head." "I don't have paper." She'd found him a legal pad from the supply closet. He'd gone through 8 pages by the following morning. So she knew those things. She didn't know what he looked like when he wasn't busted up and pale and running on hospital food. And she didn't know what his voice sounded like without the rasp that the intubation had left. And she told herself neither of those things mattered. They probably didn't. "You've got 3 more days of the drain," she said, checking the output on day 8. "After that, they'll reassess. If you're clean, we can look at step-down and then discharge planning." "Step down to where?" he said. Not hostile, just asking. She hesitated. "That's part of what Bev and I are working on. There are some transitional care options." "Transitional care," he repeated. "You mean a facility?" "Temporary, until you can manage independently." He looked at the window. Outside, the gray had shifted overnight, and there was something that might have been sun at the edge of it. "I'll be fine," he said. "You can't climb stairs yet. Can you get to your apartment without stairs?" A pause. "No." "Okay, so we work on that." She made a note. You have anyone who owes you a favor? Anyone with a ground floor setup or a couch? He thought about it for longer than someone should have to think about it. There's a guy, Danny. He's got a place in Bridgeport, first floor. He's been texting since the accident. A pause. I haven't answered. Why not? Cole picked up the legal pad, put it down, looked at his hands. Pride, he said flat. Stupid, I know. Yeah, she said. Call Danny. He looked at her. Call Danny, she said again. That's my medical advice. Call your friend. He almost smiled. This time it was closer to real. You give advice like you give instructions. I give instructions because I'm instructing. Now let me check your drain. He called Danny that afternoon. She heard about it from the afternoon shift nurse, a quiet woman named Petra, who passed the information along the way nurses passed everything along, efficiently and without editorializing. Your 412 patient called someone, talked for about 40 minutes. He was laughing at one point. A pause, and then, because Petra was human after all, I didn't know he could do that. Neither had Cara, but she filed it away. On day 10, the billing office sent a follow-up notice. The copay she'd covered had bought time. Not enough time. The Charity Care application was still in the queue, still being processed, and in the gap, the balance was accumulating at the rate that hospital balances accumulated, which was fast. The overnight stays alone were running over 4,000 a day. She was looking at the notice at the nursing station when she felt someone behind her. It was Dr. Patterson, the attending surgeon, a tall man in his 50s, with the economy of movement of someone who'd been in operating rooms for 30 years. He was looking at the notice too, not trying to read it specifically, but clocking what it was the way doctors clocked things. Mercer, he said. Yes. He made a sound that wasn't quite a comment. He's got good bone density. Excellent, actually. Whoever designed that rear suspension he was telling me about, that frame geometry concept I don't know anything about, Mo torcycles, but he explained the load distribution problem and the fix he was working out, and I'll be honest, the mechanical intuition there is pretty remarkable. Cara looked at him. Surgeons didn't usually do this, wander over to nurses and make observations about patients' mechanical intuitions. He's going to need significant outpatient physical therapy, Patterson said. The load-bearing return on that left leg is going to be a 6 to 9 month project. There's a grant program through the orthopedic rehab unit for uninsured patients. I'll put in a referral. He paused. The front desk doesn't need to know I'm doing that on my own time. He walked away before she could say anything. She sat with that for a minute. Then she went back to the notice. She couldn't fix the whole thing. Nobody could fix the whole thing. But there was a piece of it she could reach. And that was the piece in front of her. And that had always been how she approached problems. The piece in front of you. The next 4 minutes. She called Bev. The night before Cole's discharge planning meeting, she stayed 45 minutes past her shift doing paperwork that was not her paperwork, technically. But that would move the Charity Care application through a step it had been stuck at for 3 days because one form hadn't been completed correctly. She fixed the form. She noted the fix in the system with Bev's name because Bev had done the original legwork and deserved the credit. She went home. She ate leftover rice. She was asleep by 9:30. At 6 the next morning, her phone buzzed with a text from a number she didn't recognize. This is Cole Mercer. They gave me a phone for the discharge process. I need to tell you something before the meeting this morning. She stared at it. Then she texted back. Okay, tell me. The chair, the one by the window in my room, the leg on it has been cracked since day 4. Someone's going to sit on it wrong, and it's going to go. She looked at the text for a moment. She texted back. That's what you needed to tell me? You mentioned the discharge planning meeting is at 9. Someone was going to sit on it. I'll tell facilities. Thank you. She put the phone down, picked it up again. How do you know which leg is cracked? A pause, then stress fracture in the weld point. I could see it from the bed. the way the light hit it in the afternoon. She put the phone down again. She lay there for another 2 minutes, looking at the ceiling. Then she got up and started her day. He had noticed from a hospital bed, broken in multiple places, the specific structural flaw in a chair from 12 feet away because of the way afternoon light hit a weld. She thought about that on the train into St. Anthony's. She thought about it more than she would have expected to. The discharge planning meeting was at 9 as planned, and Bev was there, and the case coordinator, and Janet from billing, and the attending on days, and Cara, who was technically not required to be there, but who had sat herself in the chair across from Cole's bed, not the cracked chair, the one from the corner, and opened her notebook. Cole sat in the bed vertical, more color in his face than she'd seen since the accident, wearing actual clothes for the first time. A gray t-shirt so many one had apparently brought him the left sleeve cut up the seam to get it over the shoulder hardware. He'd shaved. She hadn't seen that coming. The meeting covered the transitional care to Danny's apartment in Bridgeport. It covered the outpatient PT schedule that Patterson had arranged. It covered the charity care application status, which Bev reported was moving forward and would likely be approved within 3 weeks based on the corrected documentation. Janet from billing looked at the numbers and looked at Cara and said, with the exact neutral professionalism that characterized everything Janet said, "There's still a significant outstanding balance that the charity care program will not cover in full." "I understand," Cole said. "We have a structured payment plan that—" "I understand," he said again. "I'll sign whatever you need. I'll pay it back." Janet started to say something about interest rates, and Cara said quietly, "Janet, he said he'll sign." Janet looked at her. Something passed between them. Janet put the papers in order and said she'd have them ready after the meeting. After the meeting, after everyone else had filtered out, Cara did the last check on his chart. She took the IV out of the back of his hand, pressed a square of gauze to the spot, taped it. He was watching her do it. 3 weeks, she said, for the charity care, and Patterson's grant will cover the PT. So the number you're paying back is going to be smaller than what they showed you today. It's still a lot, he said. Yeah, she looked at his hand. But you'll pay it. You said you would. I pay what I say. A pause, and what other people pay on my behalf. She peeled the tape wrapper and set it aside. You don't have to do that. Reyes? His voice shifted slightly. She looked up. He was looking at her with the same focused alertness he'd had since day 2, the thing she'd stopped being, startled by, but still couldn't entirely categorize. I know I don't have to. That's the point. She capped the sharps container. Your discharge is at 2. Danny picking you up? Yeah. Okay. She picked up the chart. You're going to be stubborn about the PT probably, so I want to say this while I can still say it as your nurse. You do the exercises every day. Even when the leg feels like it's on fire. You skip 2 weeks and you lose 6 months. Don't be an idiot. Yes, ma'am, he said. She walked to the door. Reyes, he said. She stopped. She'd stopped before when he said her name, she'd noticed, without deciding to. I'll see you again, he said. She turned. He was looking at her steadily. Not a question, not a flirtation, nothing so simple as that, just a statement. A thing he'd decided. She thought about the chair leg, the stress fracture, the afternoon light. Maybe, she said. She went back to her other 10 patients. She did not spend the rest of the shift thinking about Cole Mercer. She spent maybe 40% of it thinking about Cole Mercer. Danny Kowalski's apartment in Bridgeport was a first-floor unit in a 2-flat on a block that had been the same block for 40 years. The kind of Chicago neighborhood where everybody's uncle had grown up there, and everybody's cousin still did. The apartment smelled like coffee and motor oil, and a little bit like the dog Danny had owned, before the dog died and Cole had slept in the back bedroom for 2 weeks before he could make it to the bathroom without the crutches. He did the PT exercises every day, even when the leg felt like it was on fire. He'd been told not to be an idiot, and he wasn't. Danny was a big man, 6'2", and built like someone who'd spent 20 years doing exactly what Danny did, which was weld structural steel for a living. He and Cole had met at a fabrication shop on the South Side 8 years ago, and had stayed friends the way men stayed friends when they'd worked side by side through the kind of jobs that required you to trust the person next to you, which was a particular and lasting kind of trust. Danny brought him coffee and didn't make a thing of it. He put a shower chair in the bathroom without being asked. He never said anything that sounded like pity, which was the thing that would have made Cole leave. 3 weeks in, the charity care approval came through. It didn't cover everything. It covered most of it, and what was left was a number Cole could put on a payment plan and work down without the weight of it making it hard to sleep. He signed the papers that Bev sent through the mail. He filed them. He thought about the $1,800. He'd asked Bev carefully how the copay had been submitted. Bev had said a private party had covered it. He'd asked whose name was on the payment. Bev had said she wasn't able to share that. He'd said he knew it was Cara Reyes, and he needed the address to send a check. Bev had said she still wasn't able to share that. He thought about that for a while, too. He still had the number she'd used to text him about the chair. He looked at it some mornings. He didn't text it. He wasn't sure what the line was between gratitude and intrusion, and he was slow about things he wasn't sure of. What he did instead was work. He couldn't stand in a shop yet. He couldn't lift more than 10 pounds, but he had the legal pad, and then Danny bought him a second legal pad, and then Danny's girlfriend, Tricia, who managed a print shop on Halstead, brought home a drafting pad and a set of mechanical pencils after Cole had been at the apartment for 3 weeks and she'd seen what he was doing with the ballpoints. "Honey," Tricia had said, setting them on the kitchen table beside his coffee cup, "whatever that is, you should be drawing it on something better than that." He'd looked up. He'd looked at the pencils. Something in his chest had shifted sideways in a way he didn't have a name for. "Thank you," he'd said. She'd patted his shoulder, carefully avoiding the hardware, and gone to watch TV. What he was drawing was a rear suspension system for a custom touring motorcycle, the one he'd been building when the truck had hit him. The design was better now than it had been before the accident, which was a strange thing to sit with. 3 weeks in a hospital bed, with nothing but his own mind and a borrowed legal pad, and somehow the problem that had been nagging at him for 8 months had resolved itself. The stress distribution was cleaner. The geometry was tighter. He could see it the way he saw all the things he built, as a complete object in 3 dimensions before it existed the way other people saw faces or rooms. By week 5, he was down to 1 crutch. By week 7, he could climb Danny's back stairs to the 2nd floor landing, which he did every morning. Not because there was anything up there, but because the PT protocol said stairs, and stairs was what he did. He was on the back landing one morning, 7th week, doing the stair exercise when his phone rang. Not a text, an actual call, which was usual enough that he looked at the screen before he answered. It was a number he didn't recognize. Chicago area code. "Mercer," he said. A pause, then, "It's Cara Reyes. I got your number from Bev. I'm sorry to call out of nowhere." He sat down on the top step. "Don't be. I'm calling because I wanted to actually... I don't have a good lead-in for this. I wanted to see how you were doing, that's all." He leaned against the railing. The morning was cold, mid-December now, the kind of cold that made the air taste clean if you breathed through your nose. "I'm doing PT on Danny's stairs. 1 crutch, down from 2. "That's good. That's ahead of schedule, actually, if you were discharged when I think you were." "I don't skip the exercises." "I know. I got a note from the PT clinic. Standard communication back to the discharging floor." A pause. "I'm glad." He waited. He was good at waiting. "I also wanted to say," she said, and then she stopped. He heard her take a breath, and he recognized that breath. He'd heard it on the floor, the 2 in the morning kind, the kind people took when they were choosing words they hadn't practiced. "I'm sorry if the thing with the copay felt like..." "Don't apologize for that," he said. I just don't want you to feel... Reyes. He kept his voice easy. I don't feel anything bad about it. Okay? You don't need to manage that. Another pause. Longer. Okay, she said. How are you? He said. She seemed surprised by the question. I'm fine. I'm at work. I'm between rounds. That's not how you are. That's where you are. A beat. Then quietly she said, I'm tired. I've been tired since about October, and it's December now, and I don't see when that changes. She stopped. Sorry, that was more than you asked for. That's exactly what I asked for. The morning was very quiet around him. Inside, Danny was making noise in the kitchen, the particular clatter of a man who cooked the way he did everything else at full volume. I should go, she said. I just wanted to check. Coffee, he said. What? When your schedule allows. Coffee, that's it. Not a thing, just coffee. A very long pause. He let it be long. He didn't fill it. I work Wednesday into Thursday, she said finally. I'm off Thursday. Thursday, he said. You pick the place. I'll make it work. She picked a place on Michigan Avenue, a small coffee shop between a bookstore and a dry cleaner, the kind of place that had been there since before the neighborhood changed, and survived the change by being good enough at the one thing it did. She texted him the name. He was there before she was, which he'd intended, partly because he was still slow on the crutch and didn't want to make an entrance, and partly because he wanted to see her walk in without her seeing him first. She came through the door in a gray coat that was a size too big, scarf in some kind of deep red that was the first color he'd seen on her that wasn't scrubs. She looked different. She also looked exactly the same. He lifted his hand, and she saw him and came over, unwrapping the scarf, and sat down across from him, and for a moment, neither of them said anything. You shaved again, she said. I try to keep it up. You look better. You look tired, he said. The way you said. She laughed, short and real. Yeah. She waved at the person behind the counter, who clearly knew her. I come here after the long shifts. They know my order. What's your order? Black coffee, with enough sugar to make a dentist cry. What about you? Same, minus the sugar. She looked at him over the menu she wasn't really reading. That figures. What figures? Black coffee, no sugar, while you're on one crutch after 3 surgeries and never skipping PT. You're the kind of person who removes everything that isn't necessary. He considered that. You're the kind of person who adds the sugar and still functions on 4 hours of sleep. Is that a compliment or a critique? Neither. Just what I see. She put the menu down. The coffee came without her ordering it, which told him she came here enough that it was automatic. She wrapped both hands around the mug. Her hands were competent looking. He'd noticed this in the hospital too. Not delicate. The kind of hands that knew what they were doing. Tell me about the shop, she said. The one you had. So he told her. Not the loss of it, not yet. The beginning of it. The way he'd gotten the rental space in Pilsen 6 years ago. 800 square feet, the smell of machine oil and metal shavings. The first custom frame he'd built from scratch that somebody had actually paid him for. The way a good suspension felt when you got the geometry right. The specific sensation of something that had existed only in his mind, suddenly existing in the physical world, with weight and texture and the ability to take a corner at 70 miles an hour without killing the rider. She listened. She asked questions that were real questions, not the kind people asked to be polite. She asked about the load distribution problem he'd been working through in the hospital, and he explained it, and she noted at the right places. And at one point, she picked up a napkin and said, "Is it like this?" and drew something that was approximately the geometry he was describing. Rough, but not wrong. He looked at her. How do you know that? My dad was a machinist, she said. I grew up watching him work. I can't do it, but I can kind of see it. He looked at the napkin for a moment. Yeah, he said. Like that. But the angle here. He took the pen she'd used and adjusted the line. Steeper, and the pivot point moves back by about 30 millimeters. She studied it. Why 30? Because of this. He drew the force arrow. When the suspension compresses, the chain tension pulls here, and if the pivot's too far forward, the whole system fights itself. You move it back, they work together instead. She looked at the drawing. Then she looked at him. That's actually really elegant, she said. It is, he said, not modest about it. He'd worked it out for 8 months and then 3 weeks in a hospital bed. He was allowed to think it was elegant. She smiled, a real smile this time, not the professional one she'd had on the floor, and it changed her face considerably. She looked like someone who smiled like that regularly when she wasn't on 12-hour shifts. Someone who laughed at things that were funny and got loud when she cared about something. He filed it. They stayed for 2 hours. She ordered a second coffee, and he had another black one, and they talked about things that had nothing to do with hospitals, and also some things that did, because her life and hospitals were not separable things. She told him about her mom in Pilsen, the studio apartment, and the rheumatoid arthritis that was better some years and worse others. She told him about the pediatric wing in a way that made it clear she hated covering it, and also that she was very good at it, and those two things coexisted in her without apparent contradiction. He told her about his parents briefly. His father, who had been a mechanic in Gary, Indiana, and had died when Cole was 19. His mother, who had moved to Phoenix 10 years ago, and who he talked to on holidays. And who he did not add was a person he did not know how to be close to, because some things he kept to himself, until he knew whether a person would handle them well. He thought Cara Reyes would handle them well. He didn't say it yet. I should go, she said around noon. I'm picking up my mom's prescription. Pilsen's not far, he said. She paused in the act of pulling on her coat. No. I'll walk you to the train, he said. Slow, I've got the crutch. She looked at the crutch. Cole. I'm supposed to be walking, he said. PT, doctor's orders. He paused. A very emphatic nurse's orders. She pulled on the coat. That nurse wasn't wrong. She's never been wrong about anything medical that I've seen. She made you take your IV out in the middle of a sentence once. She was right. I'd been pulling on it. They went out into the cold. He was slow, but not as slow as he'd been, and she matched his pace without making it a thing, which he noticed. She didn't crowd him, and she didn't lag behind, just walked beside him on the Michigan Avenue sidewalk with her hands in her pockets, and her breath making small clouds in the December air. At the train station entrance, she stopped and turned to look at him. I'm glad you're okay, she said. That's really all I wanted to say on the phone. I'm glad you made it. I know, he said. I am too. A pause. The L rumbled somewhere underground, the vibration coming up through the sidewalk. Thursday's your day off, he said. She looked at him for a moment. Some Thursdays. Next one, he said. She turned toward the station entrance. He watched her go. At the top of the stairs, she paused, looked back. There's a hardware store on Cermak, she said, near my mom's place. They've got this back section that's all old parts and salvage. My dad used to spend hours there. She paused. If you feel like walking something other than stairs. He looked at her. Just a thought, she said. She went down the stairs. He stood on the sidewalk in the cold for a moment, looking at where she'd been. Then he started back toward the bus stop, slow and steady, the way you moved when moving was the work. The next Thursday, she took him to the hardware store on Cermak. It was exactly what she'd described. A narrow space behind the main retail floor shelves. Floor-to-ceiling bins of salvage hardware sorted by someone with a particular and loving system that made sense if you knew what you were looking at. He knew what he was looking at. He spent 45 minutes in there while Cara sat on an overturned milk crate near the door and read something on her phone. And at the end of it, he'd found 3 bushings. a set of pivot hardware, and an aluminum bracket that was exactly the configuration he'd been planning to machine himself. He came out with the parts in a paper bag and found her standing up, phone away. "You look like you found something," she said. "3 things I needed, and 1 thing I didn't know I needed until I saw it," he said. "That bracket." She looked in the bag. "What does it do?" He explained. She listened with the particular focused quality she had when she was actually interested in something, not just being polite. It was one of the things about her that he'd decided early on that she was incapable of performing interest she didn't have. On the floor, when she didn't have time for something, she said so flat and without apology. When she was interested, the attention was total. "So that's the pivot piece," she said. "That's the pivot piece. And you found it in a bin of old salvage hardware in a store on Cermak. It's a good store." She looked at him. "My dad would have liked you," she said. It came out quieter than she'd probably intended, and she glanced away after she said it, toward the store window. He didn't say anything. He let it settle the way you let something settle when you understood its weight. They walked to the tamale place 2 blocks down that she'd been going to since she was 7 years old, and they ate at the counter, and she argued cheerfully with the woman behind the counter about whether the pork tamales were better than the chicken ones, and the woman behind the counter argued back with the confidence of someone who had been having this argument for 20 years. And Cole ate the pork one, and then the chicken one, and said the pork one was better, which earned him a nod from the woman and a look from Cara. "You're just saying that to agree with me," she said. "I'm saying it because it's true." "How convenient." "The chicken one is good, the pork one is better. Those 2 things can both be true." She pointed at him with her fork. "You're annoying." He drank his water. "You like it." She didn't contradict him, which he noted. There was a night in January, 2 months after discharge, when the temperature dropped to -12 and Danny's radiator gave up, and the apartment got cold enough that Cara's texts at midnight checking in after a late shift found him sitting at the kitchen table with his jacket on and a blanket over his legs, drawing suspension geometry by the light of a clip-on lamp. He told her it was fine. She called him. He answered. "It's -12 outside," she said. "Your radiator's out. Danny's on it. Cole, -12. I've got the blanket. I have a couch," she said. He could hear the specific quality of someone who'd made a decision before picking up the phone. "It's not glamorous, but the heat works. Get a car." "Reyes, I'm not going to sleep knowing it's -12 and you're sitting there in a coat." He looked at the window. Outside the glass, the Chicago night was the kind of deep cold that had its own texture, like the air was packed with something dense and invisible. He called a car. Her apartment was in Bridgeport, too, closer to the park. A 3rd-floor walk-up in a Greystoner that she'd lived in for 4 years. He made the stairs on 1 crutch slow, and she was at the top with the door open. And she didn't say anything about the stairs being 3 flights, or about the time, or about any of the things that people sometimes made into a thing. "Couch is there," she said, pointing. "There's a heating blanket in the closet. The plug's by the window. Bathroom's down the hall. The hot water takes a minute to come through." He looked at the apartment. Small, clean, organized in a way that was clearly functional rather than decorative. Books on the window ledge, medical texts, and 1 beat-up novel she'd clearly read more than once. A framed photo on the kitchen counter. A man in his 40s in a blue work shirt, standing in what looked like a machine shop, smiling like someone who was exactly where he wanted to be. "Your dad," Cole said. She looked at the photo. "Yeah, he passed 6 years ago." A pause. Heart. "I'm sorry." "Me too." She moved to the kitchen. "You want something? I've got leftover soup. Actual soup, my mom made it." "You don't have to." "Cole." She turned. "Sit down. Take the weight off the leg. I'm going to heat up soup, and you're going to eat it, and then you're going to sleep on my couch. This is not complicated." He sat down. She brought him soup. Her mom's soup, which was chicken and something with a warmth to it that wasn't heat exactly, the kind of warmth that came from someone knowing how to cook for people who needed it. He ate it at her kitchen table, while she sat across from him with tea, and they talked about nothing important. The Hawks game. The fact that the bodega on her corner had inexplicably started stocking a very good hot sauce. The materials science problem he'd been working through on the bracket. At some point, she said, "You know, the day you came in, I was 13 minutes from the end of my shift. I was going to leave on time for the first time in 3 weeks." He set down the spoon. "I know. Darnell told me." She looked at him. "What?" "Day 2. He came by. He told me you'd been about to leave. He thought I should know." A pause. "He also told me you were the one who called the chest thing, but I already knew that. That was all you. I could feel it when it happened. That needle. 1 second I was, and then I wasn't. And then there was more time." She was quiet, her hands wrapped around the mug. "So that's the thing," he said. "That's really the thing. Not the copay, though I'll pay that back. The other thing." She didn't look away, and he didn't either. And the kitchen was very warm, which was the point of the whole evening. And outside it was -12, and none of that was what either of them was thinking about. "It's the job," she said, quiet, like she was trying to believe it. "It's you," he said. "The job is the job. You're the one who called it." She didn't say anything. She turned the mug in her hands. He didn't push. He ate the rest of the soup. She made up the couch with a heating blanket and 2 pillows, and he managed the 3 steps from the kitchen to the couch without the crutch, which was new enough that he noticed it, and she noticed him noticing it, and didn't say anything about it, just pointed at the blanket plug. He slept on her couch, and he slept well, which was not something that happened often since the accident. The apartment was warm, and it smelled like the soup, and faintly like coffee. And at some point in the night, he heard her get up for water, and the small sounds of someone moving around a space they knew in the dark, and then quiet again. In the morning, she had coffee made before he was off the couch, and she was in scrubs, which meant she had a shift, and she put a mug on the counter and said, "There's bread. Help yourself door locks from the outside when you pull it." "Cara," he said. She stopped. "I'm going to get the shop back," he said. "Not the one I had. Something better. And when I do the work I've been drawing, the suspension design, it's going to be something." He paused. "I want you to know that. Not as I'm not saying it as a pitch. I'm saying it so you know." She looked at him across the kitchen. The morning light was doing something to the room, the winter sun low and pale and coming through the window at an angle. "I know," she said. She went to work. He drank the coffee. He looked at the photo of her dad on the counter and thought about machine shops and the things you built and what they were for. The thing that Cara had not told anyone, not Priya, not her mom, not even Bev, when Bev had smiled at her knowingly across the nursing station, was that she'd looked up Cole Mercer 3 days after he was discharged. Not a deep search, just the name, the way you looked up the name of a song you couldn't stop hearing. What came up was a business registration for a sole proprietorship called Mercer Fabrication, a street address in Pilsen that matched what she remembered from his intake forms, and a single photo on a page that appeared to be a shuttered Instagram account showing a motorcycle that made her stop scrolling. She didn't know enough about motorcycles to know what she was looking at technically. What she knew was that it was the most beautiful, functional object she'd ever seen. The proportions were exactly right, in the way of things that were exactly right, the way a well-made tool looked like it could do nothing but the thing it was made for. She'd stared at it for longer than she meant to. She'd closed the app. She'd gone back to it once. She didn't tell him she'd looked, but she thought about it when he described what he was drawing, and she thought about it when he'd pulled the bracket from the salvage bin and she'd seen his face. She knew what she was dealing with. She just needed to not be reckless about it, because she had a habit of that. The recklessness of someone who moved fast when she decided to move, and who paid for it sometimes. She paid for it now. At a medium level, she fell for him in stages over the months following discharge, which she'd have preferred to do more slowly. Not from the hospital bed, which some part of her had cautioned herself against, and which she'd managed to hold. From the coffee shop. From the tamale counter. From her couch. From the soup. But there was a thing she didn't know. A thing she'd been not knowing for 3 months. And it surfaced in February in a way she hadn't expected. It surfaced because of a woman named Diane Alderman. Diane Alderman was 58 years old, the head of the Alderman Family Foundation, a philanthropic organization with offices on Wacker Drive and endowments in several Chicago hospitals, including, as of 5 years ago, St. Anthony's Medical Center. Cara knew Diane Alderman the way floor nurses knew the names on the plaques in the lobby, which was distantly and theoretically. Diane Alderman's assistant called St. Anthony's on a Wednesday in February and asked to speak with a nurse named Cara Reyes. She was paged to the nursing station phone. She assumed it was a patient callback, a referral, one of the ordinary things that came through the nursing station line. "Ms. Reyes," said the assistant, "I'm calling on behalf of Diane Alderman. She'd like to meet with you at your convenience regarding a matter of some importance. Are you available this week?" Cara looked at the nursing station. Petra was updating charts. Down the hall, 2 orderlies were arguing in an undertone about something. "What kind of matter?" she said. "Ms. Alderman would prefer to explain in person. It's related to a patient you treated in November." The November patients sorted themselves in her mind without effort. She had a memory for patients that was one of the reasons she was good at this job. November. One name came forward before the others. "What is this regarding?" she said again. "I really can't say more than that. But Ms. Alderman is very eager to speak with you. Is Thursday morning possible?" Cara had Thursday off. She said yes. The Alderman Family Foundation's offices were on the 22nd floor of a building on Wacker that had a view of the river and the kind of lobby that communicated wealth without saying anything about it. The wealth that had been there long enough not to need to announce itself. Cara wore her good coat, the one she saved for job interviews and court dates, neither of which she'd needed recently, and she sat in the reception area for 7 minutes before Diane Alderman came out herself. Diane Alderman was the kind of woman who had been handsome rather than pretty in her youth, and had grown into her face over 50 years into something considerably more interesting. She was small, wore her gray hair short, and had the specific handshake of someone who'd been shaking hands seriously for 30 years. Firm and direct, and exactly the right duration. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Coffee?" "Please." They sat in a conference room with the river view, and the coffee came, and Diane Alderman looked at Cara across the table with the directness of someone who had decided to be direct and had no interest in the other options. "In November," she said, "a man named Cole Mercer was brought to your emergency department following a motorcycle accident on Interstate 94. Cara kept her face neutral. "I'd need you to tell me how you're connected to this before I can discuss any patient." Diane Alderman nodded. "Fair. Cole Mercer is my nephew." The room was quiet. The river outside was gray-green and still moving. "He doesn't know I'm doing this," Diane said, "and I'd prefer he not know, at least initially. What I know is that Cole was brought to your department and that you were instrumental in his care. I also know that you personally covered a portion of his medical balance." Cara set down the coffee cup. "How do you know that?" "I'm at inquiries with the billing department. I identified myself as a family member. I was told a private party had made a payment. I don't always take no for an answer." Cara looked at her. "Cole doesn't know he has family with—" She stopped. "I'm sorry, it's not my place." "No, go ahead." "He told me there was no one to call when we asked for next of kin." Diane Alderman's face did something that was not quite guilt and not quite grief and was somewhere in between. "Cole and I have not been in close contact for a number of years. That's a complicated subject, and I own my part of it." She folded her hands on the table. "I became aware of the accident because of the police report. I've been monitoring his recovery from a distance. I understand the charity care program covered the majority of the balance, and that the PT grant is in place, and that he's doing well." "He's doing very well," Cara said. She was aware of how much she meant it. "Good." Diane looked at her hands. "I want to do something. I've wanted to since November. The problem is that if I contact Cole directly with money, he'll refuse it. He's refused financial help from me before." A pause. "He has his reasons. They're good ones, actually. I was not always—" She stopped. "I handled something poorly some years ago. Something important to him. I've thought about it a great deal since." Cara waited. "The hospital bill," Diane said. "The remaining balance on his account after the charity care adjustment and the payment plan. I would like to settle it." Anonymously. Through the foundation as a charitable contribution to the hospital's patient assistance fund. It wouldn't go directly to him. It would go to the fund, and the fund would apply it to qualifying accounts, one of which would be his. Cara looked at her. "You can do that?" "We've done it before. It's legitimate. The foundation makes contributions to patient assistance funds at several hospitals. This would just be timely. He'll still have the payment plan in place. He'd keep paying it. And the fund would credit his account. At some point, the balance would hit zero, and he'd get a letter saying his account was settled." Diane paused. "He'd probably spend 6 months trying to find out how it happened." "He would," Cara said. "He doesn't let things go." Diane smiled, small and tired and fond. "No, he doesn't. That's the one thing he got from our side of the family that I'm glad he kept." Cara sat with this. The river moved outside. She thought about Cole in the hospital bed with his legal pad. She thought about the bracket in the salvage bin. She thought about summer up on a cold night and a photo on a kitchen counter. "Why are you telling me?" she said. "You could do this without involving me at all." Diane looked at her for a moment. "Because I wanted someone who knows him to know it was done, and because I understand you covered his copay from your own savings." She paused. "I'd like to return that as well." "No," Cara said. "Ms. Reyes?" "No," she said again, not unkindly. "That was my choice. It's not returnable." Diane studied her. "I see," she said, in a tone that meant she was seeing something Cara maybe didn't intend to show. "The hospital contribution," Cara said. "That's your call to make. I can't tell you to do it or not do it. But if you're asking me whether he'd want it if he knew where it came from..." She stopped. "He's not proud about the wrong things. He's proud about the right things. The work, the building, the paying back. If someone he trusts settled it for him, he'd feel..." She thought about the right word. "He'd feel like he was being managed." "Yes," Diane said, "which is why it needs to be anonymous." "Then yes," Cara said. "If it's through the fund and it's legitimate, and there's no way to trace it back to you, then it helps him without costing him anything he can't afford to give." She looked at the river. "He's going to rebuild the shop. He's already designing what comes next. He doesn't need the weight of the debt hanging on him while he does it." Diane Alderman looked at Cara Reyes across the table for a long moment. "You care about him?" she said. It wasn't a question. Cara didn't make it an answer either. "I'm a nurse," she said. "I care about my patients." "He was discharged in November," Diane said. "It's February." Cara picked up her coffee. "The coffee is good, thank you." Diane Alderman almost smiled. "You're a lot like him," she said. "That's either going to be very good or very difficult." "Probably both," Cara said. She drank her coffee. Outside, a barge moved down the river, slow and deliberate, loaded with something she couldn't identify from this height. She didn't tell Cole about the meeting. This was the part that felt complicated. The part that sat with her on the train home, and in the evening when she was making dinner, and in the morning when she was back on shift. She hadn't told him because Diane had asked her not to. And because the question of when and how he'd find out was Diane's to navigate, not hers. And because she understood, in the way she understood things about people that she sometimes wished she didn't understand quite so quickly, that if she told him now, it would change something. He'd feel managed, monitored, like the people around him had been talking about him without him. She also understood that she couldn't keep this indefinitely. It wasn't a secret she could carry long without it becoming a lie by omission, which was a kind that she particularly didn't like. She was thinking about this on a Thursday in late February in her apartment when he came by. He was down to a cane now, which he used with the visible impatience of someone who resented needing it. And he'd taken the 3 flights without stopping, which she knew because she'd heard him on the stairs and counted the pauses. And there weren't any. She let him in. He sat at the kitchen table with the coffee she poured without asking because she knew his order, and he looked at her in the particular way he had, the way that noticed things, and said, "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong." "Reyes." She sat down across from him. She turned the mug in her hands. She thought about the best way to say it and decided there wasn't a best way, just the same way she'd learned to do things in the ER, just the next step. "I met someone last week," she said. "Someone connected to you. I promised I wouldn't say who, but I need you to know I met with them, and that they said something about you that I think you should know eventually when the time is right." He was very still. The particular stillness he got when he was processing something with all of him. "Connected to me, how?" he said. "Family." The word landed. She watched it land. His face did something that was very contained and very complicated, and his jaw set in the way it set when he was choosing not to react yet. "They came to you," he said. "Yes." "Because of the hospital?" "Yes." He looked at his hands. The knuckles on the left were still slightly discolored scar tissue at the base of 2 fingers from the road rash. "What did they say about me?" "That they made a mistake, years ago. That they know they made it, and they've been thinking about it since." A pause. "That they're proud of you." They didn't use that word, but it was in everything they said. He was quiet for a long time. She didn't feel it. "Who?" he said. "When you're ready to hear it, I'll tell you. Or they will. They want to. They're trying to figure out how." She looked at him. "I know that's not a satisfying answer." "No," he said. "It's not." "I know." His eyes came up to her face. "You're keeping this." "Temporarily. Not because I want to. Because the right time isn't now. And I need you to trust that." Something in his face shifted. It was slow, and she wasn't certain what it was shifting toward. And then he said, "Okay, just that." "Okay." She looked at him. "That's it? Okay." "You haven't been wrong yet," he said. "About anything." A pause. "That I've seen." She breathed. "I've been wrong plenty of times." "Name one." She thought about it. "I thought the pork tamales were better." He looked at her for a moment. Then he said, "They are better." "They're the same level of good." "They're not, Cole." "I'll take you back there," he said. "We can settle this." She looked at him. Outside, February was being February, the wind against the windows, the thin line of streetlight coming through the gap in the curtains. "Okay," she said. He reached across the table. Not for her hand, not quite. He set his hand on the table between them, open, and looked at it, and then at her, and the question was very clear and very patient. She set her hand on top of his. "I'm going to tell you everything," she said, "when it's time." "I know," he said. "I'll wait." He was good at waiting. She already knew that about him. She knew it the way she knew the rest of it. The black coffee, the legal pad, the way afternoon light hit a weld. She left her hand where it was. The letter arrived on a Tuesday in March. Cole was at the kitchen table in Danny's apartment. His own apartment now, technically. since Danny and Tricia had moved into the upstairs unit together in January, and the lower flat had passed to Cole at a rent that was below market, and came with the unspoken understanding that neither of them would ever discuss the fact that it was below market. The drafting pad was open. The suspension design was in its 4th iteration, and the 4th was the one. He could feel it the way he'd always felt the finished thing, the clean certainty of something that had found its form. The letter was from St. Anthony's billing department. He opened it the way he opened everything from St. Anthony's, carefully, because the numbers in those envelopes had a specific kind of weight that you had to be ready for. He read it twice. Then he sat with it for a while. The letter said his account balance had been reduced to 0. It said a contribution from the St. Anthony's Patient Assistance Fund had been applied to the remaining balance of his account, and that no further payment was required. It said if he had questions, he could contact the billing department during business hours. He put the letter down. He picked up his phone. He called Cara. She answered on the 3rd ring, which meant she was on the floor. "I got a letter," he said. A pause, the particular pause of someone who'd been waiting for a specific call. "Okay." "You know what it says?" Not a question. She didn't pretend it was one. "Yes." "The Patient Assistance Fund." "Cole. Who did it, Cara?" She was quiet for a moment. "Someone who's been trying to find the right way to reach you for a long time. Someone who made a mistake and knows it." A breath. "Come to the hospital. Come tonight after my shift. I'll explain everything. I promise." He looked at the letter. He looked at the drafting pad, the 4th iteration suspension geometry that was going to be the best thing he'd ever built. 7 o'clock, she said. "The coffee place on the ground floor, not the good one. The one by the lobby that has the bad pastries." "I know the one." 7, she said. "Please." He put the phone down. He looked at the design on the drafting pad for another minute. Then he picked up a pencil and added a notation he'd been working toward for a week. The specific load rating at the pivot point, the number that completed the system. He wrote it clean. He circled it. Then he got up, put on his coat, and went for a walk. He walked farther than the PT protocol strictly recommended. 3 miles on the cane through the Bridgeport streets, the March wind off the lake still carrying real cold, but something underneath it now, the suggestion of something different coming. He walked the same way he always moved when he was working something out steadily and without a destination, letting the thing turn over in the back of his mind while the rest of him watched the streets. The family member. He'd been sitting with that since February. He'd made a short list because the list was short, because his father's side was gone and his mother's side was sparse and mostly scattered. His mother's sister, whom he'd last seen at his father's funeral 19 years ago. His mother's brother, whom he'd last seen before that. And H, his mother's oldest friend, who had been like a second aunt until she wasn't. And Diane. He'd put Diane on the list and then taken her off it because the logic didn't hold, or so he'd thought. Diane Alderman was his mother's cousin, which made her a second cousin to Cole, which was not really family in the way people meant family. They had been close once, briefly, when Cole was in his early 20s, and Diane had been the one who saw what he could do and had offered to back him. A proper shop, real equipment, the chance to build at scale. He had turned it down. He'd turned it down because the strings attached to Diane Alderman's money had been real and visible, and because he'd known, even at 22, that he needed to build what he built on his own terms, or he'd spend the rest of his life not sure whether it was his. Dean had not taken it well. There had been words. He had been stubborn and probably unkind, and she had been controlling and probably right about some of the practical things. And afterward, there had been a silence that had lasted the better part of a decade. He'd thought about it since. More than he'd expected to. He'd wondered in the hospital whether the accident would have been different if he'd had people to call. And then he'd moved on because the wondering wasn't useful. But now... He walked. He turned it over. He let it settle, the way good designs settled into something you could work with. At 6:30, he walked back to the bus stop and went to St. Anthony's. Cara was already at the lobby coffee place when he got there, out of her scrubs and in her coat, 2 cups on the small table in front of her. She looked up when he came through the glass doors, and her face did the thing it sometimes did, the involuntary thing she hadn't learned to hide yet, the thing that started in her eyes before she could put anything professional over it. He sat down across from her. "Diane Alderman," he said. She looked at him. "How did you know?" "I did the list. She was the only one it could be." He picked up the coffee. "She came to you." "In February. She said she'd been monitoring your recovery from a distance. She wanted to settle the account through the Patient Assistance Fund because she knew you wouldn't take direct help from her." A pause. "I told her you'd spend 6 months trying to figure out how it happened." 5 weeks, he said. "Not 6 months." "You're faster than I gave you credit for." She wrapped her hands around her cup. "She told me she made a mistake. She wanted me to know because she wanted someone who knew you to know. And she wanted to pay back the copay I'd covered." He set the cup down. "Did you let her?" "No." He looked at her. "It was my choice," she said. "It wasn't hers to return." He sat with that. The lobby moved around them, the ordinary traffic of a hospital at 7 in the evening. The visitors and the orderlies and the woman at the information desk who had been at that desk every time he'd ever walked through these doors. "She said I was like you," Cara said. "I don't know if that was a compliment." "It was," he said. "From her it was." She looked at him carefully. "You don't seem as angry as I thought you'd be." "I'm not angry." He turned the cup in his hands. "I was a little on the walk. At the situation, not at you." "I should have told you sooner." "You told me when you could tell me." "Cole." "Cara." He met her eyes. "You did the thing you thought was right. You were right about the timing. I wasn't. I wouldn't have been ready to hear it in February." He paused. "I'm ready now." She looked at him. "What are you going to do?" "Call her," he said. "Eventually, when I've worked out what I want to say." He picked up the coffee. "She's not going to get a free pass just because she did something good. It doesn't erase the things she did before." "No." "But it's something." He drank. "Doing the work is something." She nodded. Quiet. She was looking at the table, and he could see her thinking, the visible quality of her thinking, that she hadn't yet learned to conceal from him the way she hadn't concealed the thing in her eyes when he'd walked in. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Yes." February. The night it was -12. The soup. She looked up. "I wasn't going to say anything that night," he said. "I was going to wait until I had the shop back, until there was something I could point to and say, this is what I'm building. This is what I'm offering. Something solid." He looked at the cup. "Because you're the person who covered my balance out of her emergency fund and didn't tell anyone, and you deserve more than a guy with a can and a drafting pad and 2 months of PT left." She was very still. "But I don't want to wait anymore," he said. "I want to tell you now, and whatever comes after, we figure out." She looked at him across the small table in the lobby coffee shop, with the bad pastries, the light overhead institutional and flat, and he watched her decide something. He could see the decision happening, the specific moment of it, the way she'd stopped managing and started answering. "You have the design," she said. "The pivot piece. The 4th iteration." "It's done. I finished it this morning." "Then you have the shop," she said. "You just don't have the building yet." He looked at her. "The thing you're building," she said. "It exists. It's done. The building is a detail." She put her hand on the table the same way he'd done it in February. Open. Between them. "I'm not waiting for a building." He put his hand over hers, same as before, except this time he turned it and held it, and she let him. "The tamale place Saturday," he said. "Are we still arguing about this?" "We're settling it." "The pork ones are better," she said. "That's exactly right," he said. "Yes." She looked at him, and then she smiled, the real one, the one that changed her face. And he thought about a motorcycle in a photo on a shuttered Instagram account, and a woman who'd looked at it longer than she'd intended. 3 days later, without telling Cara he was going to do it, he called Diane Alderman. Her assistant answered. He said his name. There was a pause, and then the assistant said, "One moment, please," in a voice that suggested he'd been told to say that if this name ever called. Diane answered herself. "Cole?" Diane. He was standing at the window of the apartment, the March light coming in low and flat, the same light that had told him about the crack in the chair leg 4 months ago. "I got the letter." "Yes." Her voice was careful, controlled in the way it always was, and underneath the control, he could hear something he didn't remember from before, something that sounded like someone who had been waiting. "I'm not calling about the money," he said. "I'm calling because I want to have a conversation. A real one. Not about what you did for the account, not about what happened before. A conversation about what comes next." A pause. "If you want to do that." Silence. Long enough that he thought maybe he'd misread her. "I do," she said. Her voice had changed. The control was still there, but something else was there too. Something that had gotten through. "I very much do." "Okay," he said. "I'll come to your office. Not yet, not until I've got a few more things in order. But soon." "I'll be here," she said. "I know," he said. "That's why I'm calling." He hung up. He stood at the window for a while. Outside, the neighborhood was doing the particular thing it did in early March, the dirty ice at the curbs breaking up the air, carrying the first real suggestion of mud and water, and the city coming back to itself after a long time of being locked down and cold. He went back to the drafting pad. The shop space he found in April, not in Pilsen, where the old one had been, but 3 blocks west of it, the ground floor of a building that had been a small manufacturing facility, and still had the heavy electrical hookups and the concrete floor, and the ceiling height 14 feet that he'd been looking for. The landlord was a man named Gerald, who had white hair and suspicious eyes, and who spent 5 minutes asking him questions before he agreed to anything. Cole answered every question straight. He showed Gerald the drafting pad. He explained the suspension design in terms of Gerald, who had done machining for 30 years before he'd moved into property management, understood, and asked follow-up questions about. Gerald asked about the accident. Cole told him about the accident, the truck, and the 90 hour, and the 11 weeks of recovery, without softening any of it. Gerald looked at him for a long time after that. Then he said, "You know what I'm going to say. You're going to tell me the rent. I'm going to tell you the rent is $850 a month, and the first 2 months are half price because the electrical needs an inspection, and I'm going to have that done on my dime, and I'd rather have the space occupied during the work." Cole looked at him. "You're going to be good at this," Gerald said. "Whatever you're building, I've done enough business with enough people to know." He held out his hand. "Don't make me wrong." Cole shook it. He called Cara from the parking lot. She was between patients. He said, "I found the building." She said, "When can I see it?" He said, "Saturday, after the tamale place." She said, "We're still doing that?" "We're always doing that," he said. She laughed. The sound of it came through the phone, small and clear, and he stood in the parking lot of his new shop in the April afternoon and held on to it for a second. "Saturday," she said. "Saturday," he said. But Saturday didn't go the way either of them planned, because on Friday night, the other shoe dropped. Cara was on a late shift when the attending on call, a man named Dr. Obi, who was careful and thorough and not prone to drama, pulled her aside in the hallway. "I need to tell you something before you hear it from somewhere else," he said. "The department is doing a billing audit. Routine, but it came up in the last month of records that there was an unusual payment application to a patient account in November. A personal payment from a staff member to a patient account. She kept her face very still. Okay. Billing flagged it as potentially outside department policy. It's in the hands of HR now. They may want to talk to you. He looked at her steadily. I'm telling you because I think you should know, and because I want you to have a chance to talk to someone in the union before the meeting. Is my job? I don't know, he said. I don't think so. But the policy on staff-patient financial relationships is not ambiguous. She thanked him. She finished her shift. She did not call Cole. She called Priya. Priya said, "Oh my God, I'll come over." "You don't have to. I'm coming over." Priya came over. They sat in Cara's kitchen with tea, and Priya, who was the kind of friend who processed crises out loud, while Cara processed them by going quiet, talked through the scenarios while Cara listened and looked at her dad's photo on the counter. The worst case, Priya said, is a formal reprimand and some kind of remediation. The best case is they review it and decide it's a gray area and document it and move on. And if it's not a gray area, Cara said. Priya looked at her. You'd fight it, she said, with the union. And you'd probably win because nothing about what you did hurt a patient. It broke a policy. It paid a copay, Priya said. For a man who was going to be discharged in a medically unstable state, she paused. Your instincts were right. They were always right. That's not the kind of thing you lose a nursing license over. Cara held the mug. I should tell him. Cole, he's going to find out. If there's an HR meeting, it goes in my record and... Tell him Saturday, Priya said. Tell him in person. You can't do anything about this tonight. She was right. Cara knew she was right. She went to bed. She did not sleep well. In the morning, she had 3 texts from Cole, none of which were about the HR situation because he didn't know about it yet. The first was a photo of the suspension design, the completely 4th iteration draft. Clean lines on white paper. The pivot point circled. The second was Tamale Place Noon. The third, sent at 6:15 in the morning, was, also, the bracket works. I fitted it to the test frame this morning. Geometry's exactly right. She looked at all 3 texts. She texted back, I'll meet you there. I need to tell you something. She told him at the tamale counter between the first and second order, which was not the timing she'd intended, but the situation had a gravity of its own, and she was not good at sitting on things. She told him about the audit, the billing flag, the HR meeting that hadn't been scheduled yet but was coming. He listened. He did not interrupt. The woman behind the counter brought his plate, and he didn't touch it. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. Because of the copay, he said. Yes. That I didn't know about when you did it. You didn't know? That's not relevant to the policy question. It's relevant to me, he said. He set down his fork. Cara, you could lose your job. Probably not, she said. The union thinks you could lose your job because you covered a copay for a patient who had no one? His voice was very even. The evenness of it was the thing that told her how much it wasn't even. You're in trouble because of something you did for me. I'm potentially in a meeting because of something I did because it was the right thing to do. That's different from trouble. Those are the same thing. They're not. She turned on the stool to face him. Cole, look at me. He looked at her. His jaw was set, and his eyes were doing the flat, focused thing they did when he was working something out and not liking the results. I don't regret it, she said. I want to be clear about that. Not because of how it turned out, not because of any of this. I don't regret it, because it was the right thing to do in that moment for that reason. And the fact that it's tangled up with everything else now doesn't change that. I'm going to the HR meeting, he said. You are absolutely not. To explain the circumstances. To say that I was facing discharge in a medically unstable state and a hospital staff member made a good faith decision to... That will make it worse, she said. If you walk in there, it looks like we have a personal relationship, and that's the thing they're questioning in the first place. We do have a personal relationship. I know that. That's exactly why you can't walk into that meeting. He looked at her. She looked back. The woman behind the counter was watching this with the frank interest of someone who had seen many things happen at her counter over the years and was filing this for later. Then what? Cole said. Then I go to the meeting and I explain my reasoning and I answer their questions and I accept whatever they decide. She paused. And you trust that I can handle it? A very long pause. He picked up the fork, put it down, picked it up again. I hate this, he said. I know. You covered an $1,800 copay out of your own emergency fund, and now you might get disciplined for it, and there's nothing. He stopped. His jaw was doing the thing. There's nothing I can do about it. That's not true, she said. You're sitting here. That's something. He looked at her. I didn't have anyone to call for a long time, she said. After my dad. It was just me and my mom, and we were both trying not to let the other one see how scared we were. She looked at the counter. I know what it feels like to be in a thing where there's no thing the people who love you can do about it. And having them there anyway is still something. It's not nothing. The word settled between them. The people who love you. She felt it land, watched him feel it land, neither of them looking away. I'm here, he said. Whatever they decide. I know, she said. Eat your tamales. He picked up his fork. He ate. After a moment, he said, Pork. Don't start. I'm just noting, Cole. You're right, he said. The pork ones are better. She stared at him. I said the same thing 3 months ago. I know. You argued with me for 3 months. I was wrong, he said, straight-faced. I'm acknowledging it. This is what growth looks like. She pointed at him with her fork. You're infuriating. You like it, he said, same as he'd said at the tamale counter in December. Only now it wasn't tentative, and it wasn't a question, and he wasn't looking at her like he was filing something. He was looking at her like he already knew. She turned back to her plate and ate, and the counter was warm, and the woman behind it brought them each a second without being asked. And outside, the March afternoon was getting somewhere near spring. The HR meeting was on a Wednesday. It was not what she'd spent the weekend dreading. It was 2 people from HR and a woman from the Department of Nursing Administration, and they asked their questions carefully and listened to her answers carefully. And she told them exactly what she'd decided, the truth in order, without defense and without apology. That she'd made a judgment call based on her assessment that the patient faced medical risk from premature discharge. That the financial barrier to continued care was real and immediate. That she had disclosed the payments to the billing department and had not attempted to conceal it or establish any preferential care relationship as a result. One of the HR people, a young man who kept his notes in a very organized binder, said, And are you currently in a personal relationship with the patient? The patient was discharged in November, she said. He's no longer a patient of this department. But currently, yes, she said. We're in a personal relationship, which began after discharge, which I can document if needed. The nursing administrator who had been on the floor 20 years before she'd moved into administration, and who Cara had always suspected still thought like a floor nurse when it mattered, said, Would you do it again? The same set of circumstances? Cara looked at her. I'd look harder for the institutional solutions first. I'd push harder on the charity care timeline and the discharge policy. But if I was standing in that hallway at that moment with those options in front of me, yes, I'd do it again. The nursing administrator wrote something down. The meeting ended at 11. She walked out into the hallway and stood there for a moment. Cole was sitting on a bench by the elevator bank, which he was absolutely not supposed to be here for, and he stood up when he saw her. I told you not to come, she said. I didn't go in the meeting, he said. He paused. I was in the neighborhood. St. Anthony's is not in your neighborhood. I broadened my definition of neighborhood. She looked at him. His cane was in his left hand, and he was standing completely straight, and she knew his shoulder still pulled sometimes, and the left leg ached in cold weather. And she knew that he'd taken 3 buses to get here, and the N sat on a hospital bench for an hour so he could be in the hallway when she came out. They're going to issue a formal advisory, she said. It goes in my file. No suspension, no license flag, no termination. She paused. The nursing administrator said, and I'm quoting here, that the standard for what constitutes appropriate patient care advocacy is something the department will revisit in the next policy review, because the billing gap I identified was a real one. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, You made them better. I got a note in my file. You made them look at the policy, and they're going to change the policy. He was looking at her in a way that made her want to look somewhere else, and she didn't look somewhere else. That's not a note in a file. That's the thing you did. She breathed. I'm going to need coffee. Real coffee, not the lobby stuff. The good place, he said. Michigan Avenue. Michigan Avenue, she said. They went down to the lobby. He held the door. Outside, the March air was cold, but there was something happening at the bottom of it. The particular quality of a day that was deciding to be the first warm one. Not there yet, but on the way. She stopped on the sidewalk. I want to see the shop, she said. He looked at her. Now? After coffee. I want to see where it's going to be. He was quiet for a second. She could see him recalibrating something, the same way she'd seen him recalibrate in the hospital bed when the news was hard, but workable. The way he took things in and made them part of the picture. Yeah, he said. After coffee. The shop on the west edge of Tilson smelled like concrete and old machine oil and potential, which was a combination Cara associated now with the hardware store on Cermak, and with her dad's old space, and with the photo on her kitchen counter. The man in the blue work shirt exactly where he wanted to be. Cole walked her through it with a cane, no performance about the space, just the facts of it. Where the primary work surface would go, where the electrical would run, the ceiling height that allowed for the lift he'd need for the larger framework, the back corner where there was already a ventilation hookup he could use for the welding rig. She listened. She looked. The floor, she said. He looked down at the concrete. What about it? It's got a crack in the front section. Down the center left to right runs about 6 feet. He looked at it. Looked at her. I didn't see that. Stress fracture, she said. In the seam. The light hits it from the south window in the afternoon. She paused. I've been paying attention. He looked at her for a long moment. It's cosmetic, she said. You can epoxy it. I know, he said. He was still looking at her. Something in his face had gone very still in the way it went still when it wasn't trying to contain anything anymore. Cara. It's a good space, she said. It's exactly right. Yeah, he wasn't talking about the space. She looked around at the empty room, the concrete floor with its one long crack, the tall windows letting in the pale spring light, the whole large potential of it. She thought about an ER at midnight and a gurney coming through the doors fast. She thought about a legal pad and a drafting pad and the particular geometry of a pivot point that had been worked out in a hospital bed and was now the best version of the thing it could be. She thought about the chair leg, the stress fracture, the way he'd seen it from 12 feet away because of how the afternoon light hit a weld. You're going to need help, she said. Setting it up. First few weeks. Before you've got a crew. Probably, he said. I'm off Thursdays, she said. He was quiet. And some Saturdays, she said. He said, Cara. I know, she said. I know what I'm offering. He stepped forward one step, the cane absorbing the slight unevenness of the floor, and he reached up and put his hand against her face, his thumb at the edge of her jaw, and she looked at him from 6 inches away in the empty concrete room that was going to be a shop, that was going to be a thing. And she did not look somewhere else. "I'm going to call Diane," he said, "next week. I'm going to figure out what that is, what it can be. I don't know yet." "You don't have to know yet." "I know I don't." His thumb moved slightly. "I wanted you to know I'm doing it." "Because it matters to me that you do." "Because it matters to me," he said. "And I want you to know what matters to me." She put her hand over his the way she had at the kitchen table in February, except now there was nothing of February about it. Now it was April, and the light in the empty shop was the particular light of a day that had finally decided. "The pivot piece," she said. "What about it?" "Show me," she said. "When it's built, when you've got the first one finished. I want to see it." "You'll see it," he said. "I'll make sure you're there when it comes off the frame." She nodded. He was close enough now that she could see the scar at the left edge of his jaw. The road rash she'd cleaned her first night on shift faded now to a pale line that would probably be there a long time. She'd been there when it happened. She'd been there for all of it, actually, from the ambulance bay to the drafting pad to this empty room in early spring. That, she thought, was the thing. Not the copay, not the letter, not the HR meeting. The being there. The staying. He kissed her in the empty shop, his hand still at her jaw, unhurried, the way he did everything, when he'd decided to do it. Like it was the right step, and he'd calculated the geometry, and he was certain. She kissed him back, and it felt, she thought, like the 4th iteration. The one that was done. The one that was exactly right. Outside, the south window caught the afternoon light and sent it across the concrete floor in a long, clean line, the one crack in it running 6 feet from left to right, a stress fracture in a seam already known, already accounted for, already something they could work with. 6 weeks later, Colonel E. called Diane Alderman from the shop. He'd been in the space for 2 weeks by then. The floor was epoxied, the electrical was inspected and signed off, the primary work surface was in, and the first frame for the new suspension system was clamped to the jig and waiting for the welds. He was going to start that afternoon. Diane answered herself again. He'd expected that. "I have some questions," he said, "about what happened 10 years ago. I want to hear your version of it." She was quiet. Then, "I'll tell you everything I remember, including the parts that don't reflect well on me." "That's what I want," he said. "Not an apology, just the truth of it." "I can do that," she said. "Good." He looked at the frame on the jig. The geometry was perfect. He could see already how the finished thing would move, the way the pivot would roll through the compression and come back clean. "I'm not promising we get back to what we were. I'm not promising we get to anything at all." "I know," she said, "but I'm willing to try to figure out what it could be. If you are." "Cole?" she said, and there was the thing again that hadn't been there 10 years ago, the quality of someone who'd been waiting and hadn't been sure of waiting, and was now carefully allowing herself to believe it had been worth it. "I have been willing since the day you left." He stood in his shop in the afternoon light. Outside, the street was doing the ordinary things streets did in Chicago in May. The cars and the voices and the particular sound of a city that had come all the way back from winter and was using all its colors at once. "I'll come by next week," he said, "Tuesday." "I'll be there," she said. He put the phone in his pocket. He picked up the welder. Cara came in at 6 the way she had every Thursday for the past 5 weeks, sometimes with food from the tamale place and sometimes just with coffee. And she changed into the old flannel shirt she kept on the hook by the door, now the one that had gotten machine oil on the left sleeve, on wee Ek 2, and which she had not thrown away. She sat on the stool by the work surface and read or watched or talked to him while he worked, and sometimes she drew things on the back of his old sketches, rough diagrams that were approximately right, and he would come over and adjust the line, and they'd argue pleasantly about angles. He heard her come in before he saw her, the particular sound of the door, and then her footsteps on the concrete. And he put down the welder and turned. She was carrying 2 coffees and a bag from the tamale place, and she had oil on her hands already, which meant she'd stopped to look at something on the way, in some part or piece on the work surface he'd left out. "The bracket," she said. "You fitted the bracket." "This morning." She looked at it for a moment. "It's right," she said. "You can tell just from looking at it. The proportions are right." "Yeah." She looked up at him. The shop light was doing the thing afternoon light always did in this building, coming through the south window at the low angle that turned the concrete floor gold and found every surface worth finding. She was standing in it, and she was looking at him. And she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "Pork or chicken?" she said, holding up the bag. "Both," he said. She laughed. "That's cheating." "I'm hungry," he said. "I've been welding since noon." She brought the food to the work surface, and they ate on the stools, the suspension frame on the jig beside them. The welder cooling the light, moving slow across the floor. He told her about the call with Diane. She listened the way she always listened, with all of it. And when he was done, she said, "Tuesday," like she was confirming it, filing it somewhere, careful. "Tuesday," he said. "I'm off Tuesday," she said, "if you want company." "After." "After," he said. "Yeah." She handed him the second tamale. He ate it. Outside the south window, Chicago in May was green and loud and full of itself, the way Chicago always was after it had come back from something, the kind of city that came back. He'd thought about that in the hospital, in the long nights when the monitors beeped and the floor was quiet, and he was alone in the way he'd been alone for a long time. He'd thought about what kind of person came back from something, and what that required. He looked at the bracket he'd fitted that morning. He looked at Cara. She was reading the angle on the jig with the same focus she'd had the first time she'd checked his drain. The same competence, the same certainty that she knew what she was looking at. She reached out and touched the bracket light, testing its hold. "It's not going anywhere," he said. She looked at him. She took her hand off the bracket. "No," she said, "it's not." She said it like she was talking about the bracket. She said it like she was talking about something else entirely. She said it like those two things were, in this case, the same thing. He thought about a Tuesday night in November, and 13 minutes and a needle in the right place at the right moment. And about the way you built something from a flat surface, up geometry and load, and the specific angle of a pivot point that made the whole system work together, instead of against itself. He thought about what it meant to be someone who stayed. He put down his tamale. He reached across the work surface and took her hand, and she let him. And the shop was warm, and the light was going gold, and the frame on the jig was waiting for the welds that would make it a finished thing. Tomorrow he'd finish it. Tonight was enough.